And no, the scary stuff isn't me. Well, here we go. As some of you know, recently I took a trip with my son to Iceland to celebrate his 21st birthday. We had, like many of you, looked at pictures online of this almost like alien terrain, and we'd been fascinated by it for many years. Reading history and looking at statistics and stuff, and looking at lots of other people's pictures and their videos and drone videos. But this was the year that we were going to experience it. And as you can see, it lived up to the hype. You know, everywhere you looked, there was something beautiful. There was something new to discover. There was some like new type of terrain that just called for us to get out and to go and to explore. And really, like, you couldn't take, I swear these are my pictures, you couldn't even take a bad picture unless we were in it. Being stupid. Now, these pictures, though, they still don't capture the magnitude of what we were seeing. They all fall short, no matter how beautiful they look. They all fall short of the bigness of the mountains and the glaciers that we were seeing. The blues and the greens, like, they just don't pop the way that they do in person. They aren't crisp enough to portray the beauty of the water and the sponginess of the moss that was there. The black colors in here, they just don't give you the full taste of the volcanic rock. They don't let you feel the heat of the hot springs as it came up. Experiencing Iceland is unmatched. And one day, this was all made really clear to me when we were traveling around there. Spencer and I, we were only about 4 days into our trip, but we were tired. Most of the beds were small and uncomfortable, and I'm not that big of a guy, but it was small and uncomfortable. Many of the rooms were hot and noisy, so we weren't sleeping well. And on top of it, our goal within our 12 days of being there was to see the entire country. So we were driving a lot, and we were hiking a lot, and we were tired. And as we pulled into the parking lot at Hingafoss Falls, this is the parking lot there, I was falling asleep, and so was Spencer, and that was bad because he was driving. And we looked at the hike that laid ahead of us. We had an app that would show us all this, and it was about 6 miles round trip up the side of a mountain to get to this falls. And from where we were sitting, as you can see in the parking lot, you don't even see a waterfall in this picture. You couldn't even see it. And in that moment, we were both content to just look at that waterfall online or other people's videos and just take a nap in the parking lot and move on. Because really, there are waterfalls everywhere in Iceland. It's just littered with waterfalls. But something inside of my son, something inside of Spencer told him no, and all of a sudden he like perked up and he said to me, okay, let's get a snack, let's get a drink of water, let's get out in the cold air and let's do this, because if we don't, we will regret this. And at that moment, as a father, I was so very proud and so extremely disappointed at the same time because I wanted a nap. But we got out, we ate a snack, we got some water, it was cold, and we took off for the falls. And it didn't take long for the falls to appear, and with every step to just get bigger. So as we kept going, we started to see the falls off in the distance. And at the end of this 3-mile hike, at the end of the path that was there, it ended, and there was this sign that described like what we were looking at and told that it was the second largest waterfall in the country and all those statistics and everything about it. And most of the people who had hiked all the way up there, they stopped there, they read the sign, they gained some knowledge about it, they took a picture from about a mile away from the falls, and they turned around for their descent back down the mountain. They were satisfied. But nothing said that you couldn't continue on, and to Spencer and I, that is an open invitation to explore and to experience. And in fact, it helped that we saw some other people who were already continuing on, which propelled us forward faster. And as we went on, when other people stopped, we just kept going. We climbed over these rocks and boulders. We crisscrossed across a rushing stream, and we worked our way within 30 feet of where the water was falling. And then this is what we experienced. The water spray from that waterfall almost hurt. And the wind was just so crisp from the chill of the glacial water that it was coming from. There's a huge glacier that was up there that it's melting off, and that's where the waterfall comes from. And we almost missed it. And why? Because it would have been easier to take a nap in the parking lot. That experience of that day was one that we won't ever forget. We drank glacial water straight off the glacier. We took rocks away from there and brought them back home with us. I have one that sits on my desk at home. It re-energized us in that day. And when we left, and got back down, or when we got back to the pathway, we ran down that trail like little kids. Him with much more pep than I. And as you've probably already guessed, today isn't a travel guide commercial for Iceland, but rather a life lesson with a spiritual implication inside of it. Because looking at waterfalls online or taking pictures from the parking lot or at the end of a trail, not having the experience on a vacation is one thing, or not ever experiencing some place that you've looked at online for a long time and only having knowledge of it, that's one thing. But we tend to do this in a spiritual sense as well. We do this with God. We settle for what the Greeks called oida, which translated and defined is just basically to have or to know information. To know information. And in our information world that we live in today, it is so easy to know all about something or someone in life. Many people, I know are into celebrities and sports celebrities and whatever, and they can tell you all about those people's lives because they keep up with it. But it ends there, because if they were ever to meet that person, whether a movie, television star, just regular celebrity in this life or world, a sports star, whatever, they could quote the stats at the person that they know about them and tell them all about their life, but it would end there. And I doubt that celebrity would be impressed. Maybe a little creeped out, but not impressed. You see, we know lots of things, or we know how to get the knowledge of many things in our lives. A favorite phrase of our time is Google it, right? If you don't know, you can have knowledge about almost anything within just minutes. But the Greeks had another word that went beyond just having information. That word was gnosko. Gnosko, to understand, the recognition of truth from experience. And I'm here to convince you today that we need to decide to not settle for oida, just having information, just having a knowledge of God. Instead, that we need to move towards understanding God's heart for us and experiencing Him. And I'm talking to you no matter where you are on the spectrum of believing in or not believing in, calling yourself a Christian, just starting to figure it out, or fooling yourself into thinking that you have it all figured out already. If you can't tell a story of gnosko, and all you have is oida, no matter where you're at in your connection to God, oida, the information, it just falls short. knowledge can only take you so far. And I believe that the way that we do this is what makes this scary stuff. You see, we begin to experience God when we move towards the mess of life, which is so counter to our prayers as Christians, right? Have you ever listened to how we pray? We pray for beautiful weather, traveling mercies, safety, security, make everything really, really nice and easy. It's as if we believe that we deserve smooth sailing in life after we get saved or accept Christ, whatever terminology you want to use there. But what Jesus has invited us into is not that. What Jesus invites us into, it's just not that. He makes that abundantly clear in his most famous public address, or what we've come to call the Sermon on the Mount. Now, Matthew gives us an account of this in what we call chapter 5 of his writing, the book of Matthew. He tells us that Jesus sees this really large crowd that's started to follow him. And so he stops on this hillside and he begins to talk with those people. And the very first thing that he talks about are what have become known as the Beatitudes. Now, if you've been around church, you've possibly heard these. These are those things that all start with blessed are as their beginning. And again, we have come to look at these things and to say, look how blessed we are. This is what Jesus said over and over again. And we want to pick and choose from those Beatitudes the ones that benefit us the most. But there's a cause and effect relationship that goes along with these Beatitudes. And this word beatitude is another interesting Greek word that we've lost a lot of the meaning of in our lives. About 300 years after Jesus, the Greek philosopher Aristotle, he observed that no person deliberately chooses to be unhappy. So he said, if this is the case, then human beings wish to be happy, and the search for happiness then led them as they were looking at what kind of happiness that there might be. Now, in 2022, we can all attest to the fact that we are in a constant pursuit of happiness. Every day, we're looking for some kind of happiness. So the Greek philosophers then looked and they acknowledged that there were different levels of happiness, and they put words with that. The first word that they said was leitos, happiness in a thing. On Wednesday of this week, I was gifted by my family a new smoker grill as an extremely early birthday gift. Before I even had it out of the box, I had this level of happiness because of this thing that was sitting there. It went away on Friday when I had to put it together. Because, as we all know, happiness in a thing, it just doesn't last. Because the thing gets old and then you want another thing. The second level of happiness that they observed was called Felix, the happiness of comparative advantage. Now, this is why comparison, or comparing yourself to someone else in life, this is why comparison is a trap. Because I can compare myself to someone who is worse off than me and walk away with that comparative advantage that tells me I'm doing good because I'm better off than them. And it can bring me momentary happiness. But on the flip side of that, I can compare myself to someone who I perceive as ahead of me in life, doing better than me in life, and I can walk away with a sadness that I'm not more well off in some sort of way. Pretty sure we could all pass a microphone around and tell stories about this in our own lives. But the last one that they came up with is beatitudo. This is the happiness that comes from seeing the good in others and doing good for others. It's an other regarding action. So Jesus starts out his most famous speech, sermon, and he says, you want to be happy? You want to feel blessed? You need to have beatitudo. Now, I'm going to speed through these, but I want you to pay attention to the tension that you may feel as you read the yellow words that are going to be on the screen. Okay? And I want you to ask yourself as we read through this, are these the things that make me happy? Okay, everybody got the assignment? All right, if you're ready, here we go. Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, or the people who leverage who they are for other people, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, not just for themselves, but for and with other people, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, the people who know when to be quiet, gentle, and submissive, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, not self-righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, those that forgive again and again and again and again and again and again repeatedly, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, the people with no selfish objective, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, not the peacekeepers who just sweep things under the rug or turn a blind eye, don't confront people in life, but who do the hard work to make peace, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, or the people who do the right thing even when everyone around them isn't, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So, how did you do? Is that the happiness that you're pursuing in life? Not me. And Jesus said, this is where real ultimate happiness comes from. This is a messy list. It's full of heartache, it's full of pain, it's full of discomfort, it's full of struggle. There's not a lot of safety or peace or calm or niceness or traveling mercies. But let's be honest for a moment. That list is full of real life. Real life is full of bumps and bruises and insults and disagreements and pain. And Jesus tells us that real happiness in real life is found in the middle of all of that. But we're pain and risk averse as a society, aren't we? And possibly worse as a Christian cross-section of our society. It's why we Christians did things like create Christian schools and Christian bookstores and Christian coffee shops and Christian music, and the list of adjective Christian things goes on and on and on, because we wanted to remove ourselves from anything that could disagree with us or insult us or cause pain or cause discomfort. And so now we find ourselves in 2022 with all these cultural shifts happening every day around us, and for many of us Christians, they scare us. And for many of us, we just want it to go away. We don't want to have to talk about or to anyone that represents things like LGBTQIA+. It's easier for us to make broad statements and paint with a broad brush and ask God to just protect us from that. We're more comfortable talking about not trying to understand things like gender dysphoria, rather than realizing that for most of us, we've never changed it from an issue to a person. We might yell about abortion or picket an abortion clinic, but to have a conversation with someone who has gone through it or is scared and just trying to figure out life, we don't want to do that. To seek to understand, to get in what we see as a mess. No, it's easier to just kind of yell on social media. We'd rather hold on to our political persuasions than to admit that maybe we don't know. And to try to win a friend rather than win an argument. Or many of us are just content to be busy and ignore that there is anything messy at all in our world. staying in our socially safe bubbles, thinking that, we're good. And guys, I have to think that Jesus looks at those of us who say that we are his followers and sometimes just scratches his head. Because I'm not sure what example of Jesus that we're actually following. And just a few sentences later, Jesus gives us an urgent command as his followers that should make us stop and think for a moment. Now, I'm going to warn you, if you're a lifer in the church, you've heard this next statement before. In fact, some of you have maybe already read ahead here. It's just fine. And you're going to want to run ahead of me with this idea here. But I want you to hold back, and I want you to read this differently with me when we do this. I want you to read this in light of everything that we just read of the Beatitudes. So Jesus says in verse 13 of Matthew 5, he says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." I believe that we have removed ourselves from what we perceive as the messy situations in life so much that we have lost a lot of our saltiness. Now, we are no longer the right kind of salty. We're salty as in angry, but we're not making anything better. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but salt is the most simple thing that you can add to food to make it immediately better. If you have nothing else, you can put salt on it. But unfortunately, adding the average Christian to a conversation, to a situation, to an event, to a question, to a discussion, it doesn't make it better most of the time. It's made worse by the self-righteous attitude from a person that has removed themselves from society and gives a 10-cent answer to a $1 million question that someone who is truly searching is asking. And thus, that removes the credibility from the followers of Jesus who are poor in spirit, that mourn in the issues of life with people. It gives a bad rap to the meek ones who lead with mercy and offer grace in tough situations rather than just spitting truth at people because the world's going to hell. Making the Jesus followers who with pure hearts want to make peace and don't find insult in the insults start from a deficit where people who have been turned off or turned away by well-meaning but misguided church people. So Jesus goes on, and he says in the next verse, he says, "You are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill, it cannot be hidden." You see, guys, we are meant to be a center point for culture. A place where culture is derived and understood rather than ignored and complained about. And if all this sounds really messy to you, let me assure you that it is. But when you realize that you're a mess, you will move towards the mess. When you realize that you're a mess, you will move towards the mess. We are all messy human beings to Jesus, and his example is undeniable to us. Jesus could have gone to the people that had studied all about him, that had all of the oida that he could ever want. He could have spent his time with them as they celebrated him, but he went to the people who were marginalized and disconnected. Some of them criminalized, and he gave them hope and a purpose. Women found worth through Jesus. Criminals found mercy with Jesus. Prostitutes were given grace with Jesus. And the people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. And he, in turn, loved them. And I think that's still true today. So if you, Christian, want to have gnosko, to gain experience of Jesus and his heart, I'm inviting you today, and Jesus invited you a long time ago, to move towards the mess in and around your life. Because listen, chasing comfort will only lead to complacency. But when we engage culture, when we lead with mercy and grace, when we allow people, as Jesus did, to discover the truth of who he is and what he wants for all of us, for themselves, when we engage this stuff that we find scary, we begin to live as followers of Jesus in this world. And Jesus wrapped up this section with this. He said this in verse 16. He said, in the same way, so just like the city on a hill that can't be hidden, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. People should see a picture of Jesus, who is a picture of God, through our lives and the way that we interact. Christians, let me talk to you for a minute. So if you don't consider yourself a Christian or a follower of Christ, you can tone me out for a minute, but stay in. I'm going to talk to you in a second. Christians, who do you need to engage? What part of life or culture do you need to look at differently? Where haven't you exercised being poor in spirit, mourning with those who mourn, meekness in your attitude towards things that you don't understand? Where do you need to show mercy and be pure in heart rather than impure in your motive? Like, what are the things in life that you need to seek peace for, to make peace rather than keeping it with the people in your life? Where do you need to stay the course of doing right even though no one else is? Or realize that those insults are because you're acting like Jesus, and when I say that, I mean the real Jesus. Now, person in the room struggling to figure this out, to figure this Jesus thing out, let me talk to you for a minute. Maybe you like Jesus, but you're not sure about most of his followers. Get in line. It's long. But let me be clear. I'm inviting you to ask your questions, to engage with Jesus. And if you're willing, let us be your guide, not your conscience, but your guide. You've possibly been hurt, turned off by the attitude of some Christians that you've run into in life, turned away by a church that didn't agree with you and decided to not have a conversation with you, but to write you off. And I get it, but that's not our attitude here. And for everyone, I want to invite you to something new that we're doing tomorrow night, starting at 6:30 p.m. out on the patio with the fire pits. We're calling them Ask Anythings groups. This is an opportunity for Christians who are not sure how to re-engage culture around them to come and humbly ask questions. It's not a time for you to come and to debate whether or not we should be doing this. If that's what you want to do, you can talk to me afterwards, or you can just go read about Jesus' life, and it'll probably make it pretty clear for you. This is also an opportunity for those of you that have questions about Jesus that have maybe never been answered at all, to come and to ask those questions. We promise no question is too big or too small, and that nothing is off limits, and that you will be approached with meekness and with a pure heart from the people who are representing there. We're hosting these out on the patio because we wanted to have an informal setting, and some of the best conversations that I've ever had with people in my life have been around a fire pit. But to everyone, let me encourage you. The writer of Hebrews said this, and we don't know who wrote this, but he said that God, rewards those who earnestly seek him. God is available to you. Jesus loves and wants the very best for you. And ultimate happiness, beatitudo, can be found when gnosko, experiencing him through other people, happens. So engage, ask, open your heart to something more or something new. Move toward the mess. I promise that you will be glad that you did. And don't miss next week as we continue to talk about some scary stuff. Let me pray, and then you'll be dismissed for the day. Jesus, thank you that you moved towards us while we were still a mess. And I know for some of us, we maybe don't remember that time. Maybe we don't even see that time in our life, but it's there and it is still inside of us. We're all just such a mess. So Jesus, I pray that we would become an expression of who you really are as Fair Creek Church, people who want to get into the messiness of life and want to love people in the middle of it. We say that we're for. I pray that you would help us to become for in every situation of our life. And I pray that we would move away from Oweda just having information into Gnosko, having experience of you through other people. And I ask this in your name, Jesus.